Hi everyone. I have prepared 3 true terrifying home alone stories that I would like to share with you all tonight. Before we begin, let me know where in the world you are watching from, and at what time. Now, sit back, relax and let's begin. I was never scared to be home alone. My parents left for the weekend, trusting me to take care of the house, and our golden retriever, Max. I had done it before, 2 nights by myself, in a quiet neighborhood, nothing but the occasional creak of the house settling, or the hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. It was supposed to be just another weekend. Then on the second night, Max started acting strange. At first it was small things. He would sit by the basement door, his ears perked, his body tense, his tail usually wagging, was still. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was just restless. But that night, he started whimpering. I was on the couch, watching TV when I heard it. A soft, distressed whine. At first I thought he was by the back door. Maybe he needed to go outside. But when I looked around, Max was gone. Then I heard it again. The whimpering was coming from the basement. I hesitated, staring at the door. It was slightly ajar, the darkness beyond it stretching down into the unseen. I felt a cold pit in my stomach, but I shook it off. It's just Max. He probably wandered down there. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, stepping cautiously toward the door. Max, I called. Come here, boy. Nothing, just another whimper, softer this time. I swallowed hard and stepped inside, my fingers tightening around my phone. The stairs creaked under my weight. As I slowly descended, halfway down, the basement light flickered on by itself. I froze. Max wasn't down there, but someone else was. A man stood at the bottom of the stairs, completely still. A mask covered his face, plain white, featureless, except for 2 hollow eye holes. He didn't move, he didn't blink, he just stood there, staring up at me, and in his hand, Max's collar. I couldn't move. The man just stood there, at the bottom of the stairs, gripping Max's collar in one gloved hand. The air between us felt thick, suffocating, as if the entire house was holding its breath. Max was nowhere in sight. My brain scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe this was some horrible prank. Maybe I was dreaming. Then, he tilted his head, slow, deliberate, as if he was studying me. That tiny motion snapped me out of my paralysis. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stumbled back up the stairs, nearly tripping over my own feet. I threw myself against the basement door, slamming it shut with all my strength. I locked it. Then I ran. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking so badly, I could barely open the keypad. 911. The call barely rang once before a voice answered. 911. What's your emergency? I opened my mouth to speak, then stopped. Something wasn't right. The voice on the other end, it sounded wrong, flat, emotionless, like someone trying to sound normal but failing. Hello, I whispered. A long pause. Then, you should check the back door. Click. The call cut off. The room spun around me. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to believe it was just a coincidence, that the call had dropped, that I had misheard the voice. But as I turned toward the back door, I saw it. The lock was undone. The door was slightly open. A chill slithered down my spine. I was positive that I had locked it earlier. I took a shaky step forward, my body moving before my brain could stop it. Then, thump, a heavy footstep, not from the basement, from inside the house. I turned, my heart slamming into my throat. Down the hall, just beyond the dim glow of the kitchen light, the man in the mask stood in the doorway. Inside my house, I never heard him open the door. I never heard him come up the stairs, but he was there. And this time, he was holding something else. A knife. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The man in the mask stood in my kitchen, just a few feet away, blocking my only exit. The knife in his hand glinted in the dim light, its blade long, sharp, too clean. His head tilted slightly, just like before, like he was studying me, like he was enjoying this. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body felt locked in place, my breath shallow and uneven. Then, he took a step forward. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the couch. My brain was working in overdrive, searching for a way out. But my options were bad. The front door, too far. He'd reach me before I could unlock it. The window, I'd never get it open fast enough. The basement, not a chance. I had seconds to decide. I did the only thing I could. I ran toward the hallway, straight for my bedroom. I heard his footsteps pounding after me. Quick, heavy. He wasn't running. He was walking fast, like he knew I wasn't going to make it. I barely got inside my room before slamming the door shut and locking it. A second later, thump, he hit the door, hard. I scrambled back, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone. The last 911 call was fake, but I had to try again. I dialed, pressing the phone to my ear, listening desperately. No dial tone, just silence. And then, a click. That same voice came through the speaker, flat, emotionless. "You shouldn't have run." My stomach dropped. I threw the phone across the room, my breath coming in panicked gasps. My hands searched for a weapon, anything, but all I had was a lamp and a pair of scissors. Then, the doorknob jiggled, slowly, testing the lock. I clutched the scissors in my hand, backing against the wall, trying to think. Then I heard it, a new sound, not from the door, from above me, a soft creak, a whisper of movement. The attic hatch in my ceiling, it was shifting, something was moving inside it. My blood went cold, because that meant there wasn't just one person in my house. I didn't want to look up, I didn't want to see, but my eyes betrayed me, slowly drifting toward the attic hatch above my bed. It was cracked open, and something was shifting inside. A slow, deliberate movement, like someone trying not to be heard. My entire body felt cold, my fingers gripping the scissors so tightly that my knuckles ached. The doorknob rattled again. The masked man was still outside, but now, I had something above me too. I was trapped. I forced myself to breathe, my mind scrambling for a plan. The window, I had to get out through the window. It was the only way. Slowly, I took a step backward, never taking my eyes off the attic hatch. Then, something fell from it. A rope, a thick knotted rope, dropping down from the attic like a twisted invitation. It dangled in the center of my room, swaying slightly. My stomach lurched. I wasn't alone in this house. There were two of them, the man outside my door, and the one waiting for me in the attic. Then I heard the breathing. Not from the hallway, from above, shallow, slow, waiting. The man outside banged against the door, harder this time. I couldn't stay. I had seconds to move before one of them got in. I lunged for the window, shoving it open so hard that the glass rattled. The cool night air hit my face, and for a brief moment, I thought, I can do this. I can get out. Then, a hand grabbed my ankle. I screamed, twisting, kicking wildly, but the hand was strong, pale fingers, covered in grime, curling around my skin. The man from the attic. I kicked again, this time hitting something solid. A grunt. The grip loosened just enough for me to yank my leg free. I didn't look back. I threw myself out of the window, crashing onto the grass below. My ankle twisted painfully, but I didn't stop. I got up and ran, through the yard, across the street. I turned back only once. The masked man stood in the window now, watching me go. And behind him, a second face, pale and grinning from the attic hatch. The police never found them. The attic was full of old food wrappers, blankets, and notebooks filled with drawings of my house, and of me. Someone had been living there for months, waiting. Even now in my new apartment, I still check the vents. I still wake up in the middle of the night, expecting to hear a doorknob rattle. I don't think they were trying to kill me. I think they were playing with me. The trombone is word never. I saw my head, but knock. It was just past midnight, and the house was silent. I had been curled up on the couch, half asleep, when the sharp rap at the door jolted me awake. My first thought was, who the hell is knocking this late? I sat up slowly, heart already pounding. Something felt off. Then, a voice. "Ma'am, this is the police. We received a call from this address. We need to come inside." I froze. I hadn't called the police. I crept toward the door, my bare feet silent against the floor. I didn't turn on the porch light. I didn't want whoever was out there to see me. Instead, I peeked through the peephole. A police officer stood on my doorstep, tall, broad shoulders. His uniform was perfect, badge gleaming under the dim glow of the streetlights. A utility belt hung around his waist, radio, holster, handcuffs. But something was wrong. His face, he was smiling, not a reassuring smile, not the kind a real cop would give to ease someone's nerves. No, this was wrong. Wide, unblinking, like he knew something I didn't. My stomach twisted. "Ma'am, please open the door. We need to ask you a few questions." I didn't move. I barely breathed. "Are you alone in there?" That made my blood run cold. I swallowed, my mind racing. If he was really a cop, I could just ask for his name, his badge number. I took a breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Can I see your badge number?" A long, awful pause. Then, the smile widened. My hands started shaking. And that's when I heard it. The back door unlocking. For a moment I felt like my entire body shut down. No, that wasn't possible. I had locked it. I was sure I had. The front porch was empty now. I whipped around just in time to hear the faintest creak from the kitchen. The sound of the back door swinging open. Someone was inside my house. My chest tightened, my pulse roaring in my ears. I ran, not toward the door, not toward the back, to my bedroom. I slammed the door, locked it, and grabbed my phone. 911. The call barely rang before someone picked up. 911. "What's your emergency?" I need help," I gasped. "There's someone in my house. They're pretending to be a cop. Please send someone." Another pause. Then, "Ma'am, the police are already there." I nearly dropped the phone. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, they're not real. They're not real. Stay where you are, ma'am," the voice on the phone said. Then, from the hallway right outside my bedroom door, a soft knock. Tap, tap, tap. "Mom," the voice outside said. The same voice I had just heard on the phone. "We need you to come out now." I gripped my phone so tightly my fingers ached. "We need you to come out now." The voice was right outside my bedroom door. The same voice that had just been on the phone with me. My heart pounded so hard. I thought I might be sick. This wasn't possible. "Mom," the voice called again. Calm, flat, expectant. Tap, tap, tap. The knocking was gentle, but that was what scared me most. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't demanding. It was like whoever was out there knew they didn't have to rush, that they had all the time in the world. I forced myself to move, stumbling backward until I pressed against the farthest wall of my bedroom. My hands shook violently as I typed a text to my best friend. 911 UA fake. Someone is inside. Call real cops now. I sent it, praying she would see it fast enough. Then, a new sound. Not from the door. From underneath it. A shadow passed beneath the gap. Then, a piece of paper slid into my room. I hesitated, staring at it, my breath ragged. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then, slowly, trembling, I picked it up. My stomach dropped. It was a Polaroid of me, taken through the peephole. I felt like the air had been sucked from the room. No. My brain refused to process it. That picture, it had been taken minutes ago, before I ever knew what was happening, before I even realized they had been watching me. I dropped the photo like it burned. My hands clamped over my mouth, trying to stop the sob that was rising in my throat. Outside, the knocking stopped. Silence, but not a good silence. A listening silence, like they were waiting to see what I would do next. Then through the door, the handle turned. Slowly, deliberately, I scrambled back onto my bed, my body shaking violently. I held my breath, waiting for the lock to fail, for them to push their way inside. But then, footsteps, moving away, not fast, slow, like whoever it was, wanted me to know they weren't in a hurry, like they already knew I wasn't going anywhere. The footsteps faded. Then, the sound of the back door, unlocking again. I stayed there for hours, too terrified to move, too terrified to even breathe too loud. When the real police arrived, they found the back door wide open. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, just one thing left behind. A police badge. Fake. I moved out the next week. The cops never found who it was, but every now and then, I still get calls, numbers I don't recognize, numbers that don't exist. And when I pick up, the voice on the other end is always the same. Calm, flat. We received a call from your address. We need to come inside. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I sat on my bed, knees pulled to my chest, phone clutched in my trembling hand, listening. The footsteps had faded toward the back door, but I couldn't be sure if they were really gone. Was this a trick? Were they waiting? Every second stretched painfully, my heart hammering in my chest. I stared at the door, terrified that at any moment the lock would click open, and the masked officer, or whoever had been outside, would step inside and finish whatever game they were playing. I checked my phone. No new messages, no calls. Had my friend even gotten my text? Had she called the real cops? I couldn't stay in this room forever. I had to make a move. Slowly I slid off the bed, my legs weak beneath me. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a metal lamp from my nightstand, and crept toward the door. The house was silent, but not empty. I cracked the door open just an inch. The hallway was dark, too dark. I reached out, flicking the light switch. Nothing. My stomach dropped. The power had been cut. The only light now came from the glow of the street lamp outside, leaking through the curtains in the living room. I forced myself forward, my breath shaky, every step sending a cold shiver up my spine. I had to check the doors. I had to make sure. I stopped dead in my tracks. The front door was unlocked. I knew for a fact I had locked it earlier, and now it was just slightly ajar. The air inside the house felt wrong, heavy, like I wasn't supposed to be there, like I was trespassing in my own home. Then I saw it, lying on the floor, just inside the doorway, another Polaroid. I bent down, my fingers barely able to grasp the edge with how badly I was shaking. It was me again, taken from inside the house, from the end of the hallway, from right outside my bedroom door. I sucked in a sharp breath, the reality slamming into me like ice water. They had been inside, while I was hiding in my room, while I was texting for help. They had been standing right outside my door, watching. I felt like I was going to throw up. I turned toward the back door, still wide open, the night beyond it empty, waiting. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything, but I was too scared to move. Then the red and blue lights flashed outside. The real police. I didn't even remember calling them. I didn't remember moving, but suddenly, I was outside, my breath ragged, tears in my eyes, as I collapsed onto the porch, finally safe. My parents came home the next morning. The second they walked through the door, I broke down. I told them everything. The fake officer, the voices, the Polaroids, the back door unlocking by itself. They wanted to believe I had imagined it, that it was just paranoia, just exhaustion, until they saw what the police found. The back door had been tampered with. Someone had used lockpicking tools to slide the latch open from the outside. In the attic, a makeshift hiding spot, old food wrappers, a sleeping bag, and worst of all, a box of photos of me, taken over weeks, maybe even months, at school, at the grocery store, and the worst one, a picture of me asleep in my bed. We moved out the next day. We didn't wait. We didn't argue. My parents didn't care about breaking the lease, about losing money. They just wanted us gone. I should have known something was wrong sooner. Looking back, all the signs were there. Little things at first, the TV turning on by itself, the feeling that objects weren't quite where I left them, the faint creak of floorboards in the middle of the night. But I lived alone, in a small apartment on the top floor of a 3-story building, so I told myself it was just my imagination, or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. The first time I noticed something really off, it was the food. I had a strict grocery routine. I bought the same things every week, always placing them in the same spots. But one morning, I went to grab a yogurt from the fridge, and 3 were missing. At first, I thought I must have eaten them and forgotten. I was tired, work had been stressful, and my mind was constantly occupied with things I needed to do. Then my leftovers disappeared. A full takeout container of pasta I had planned to eat for lunch. Gone. No container in the fridge. No dirty dish in the sink. I searched the trash, thinking maybe I had tossed it without realizing. But the container wasn't there either. It was just missing. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe I threw it out in a late night daze. Maybe I had eaten more than I thought. Then, a few nights later, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of the TV blaring from the living room. My heart nearly stopped. I lived alone. The remote was on my nightstand. I sat up, frozen in place, my pulse hammering. The light from the TV flickered against the hallway walls, illuminating the edges of my bedroom door. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight. Slowly, I crept out of bed, my bare feet silent against the floor. I peeked into the living room. No one was there. The remote sat on the coffee table, undisturbed. The apartment door was still locked. I grabbed the remote, turned off the TV, and stood there in silence, listening for any sound, any hint that someone might still be inside. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I barely slept that night. The next day, I convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe my neighbor's remote was on the same frequency, and somehow, they had turned on my TV by accident. Maybe there was a timer set on it that I had forgotten about. I spent the evening making sure all the windows were locked, double-checking my door, and telling myself it was all in my head. Then, as I was brushing my teeth, I noticed something. The attic hatch. It was open, just a crack. I stared at it, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. My apartment didn't even have an attic. At least, not one I had access to. I assumed it was for maintenance, maybe a crawl space for electrical wiring, but I had never seen it open before. I told myself the air pressure must have shifted, that maybe I had slammed a door too hard and knocked it loose. I went to bed with the uneasy feeling that I was being watched. I should have left. I should have called someone. Because that night, I heard the voice. I woke up to a sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A faint noise coming from the air vent above my bed. My skin prickled with cold fear. I lay completely still, staring at the vent, my breath shallow. Scratch, scratch. Then, a whisper, very soft, very calm. I think you're pretty. My blood turned to ice. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the vent, my whole body paralyzed in terror. Because I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining it. Someone was inside my vents, and they had been watching me. I lay there frozen, staring up at the air vent. I think you're pretty. The words slithered through the vent, like a breath, soft and deliberate. My entire body felt cold, my skin crawling as I strained to listen for more. Silence. Then, scratch, scratch, slow, gentle, like fingernails dragging against metal. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my throat, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get out, but I couldn't move. I didn't want to breathe too loud. Whoever was up there, they were listening. I slowly reached for my phone, never taking my eyes off the vent. My fingers trembled as I opened the emergency dial screen, but before I could press call, something shifted in the vent. A shadow moved behind the slats. I nearly dropped my phone. I clamped a hand over my mouth, suppressing a gasp. There was someone inside my vents, and they were moving. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, my heart hammering. My bare feet barely made a sound against the floor. As I inched toward the door, my fingers already reaching for the lock. Then, thump. I sucked in a sharp breath. That wasn't scratching anymore. That was something crawling inside the vent, shifting their weight. I didn't wait to hear more. I ripped the door open and bolted into the living room, grabbing my keys off the counter. As I reached the front door, I heard it, a slow, drawn-out creak. I turned, my entire body trembling. The attic hatch, the one I had seen open just a crack the night before, was now hanging completely open, a gaping hole in my ceiling. The silence in the apartment felt wrong. It wasn't just empty, It was expectant, like someone was waiting for me to make the next move. I didn't. I yanked the door open and ran. I stood outside my building, my breath ragged, my hands shaking so badly, I could barely hold my phone. I called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later, my neighbors peeking through their blinds, as 2 officers stepped inside my apartment, their flashlights cutting through the dimness. I stood at the doorway, refusing to go back inside. I didn't tell them about the whispering. I didn't tell them about the voice in the vent. I just told them the truth. I wasn't alone in there. They searched the entire place. The attic, the vents, the crawl spaces. For a long time, nothing. Then one of the officers cursed, and I knew. They had found something. The officer returned with a duffel bag. It was filthy, covered in dust. The zipper rusted. Inside, they found a pile of clothes, wrappers from food I hadn't eaten, and that bone, not mine, a burner phone, and on the back of it, in messy handwriting, a name, mine. I felt sick. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "He's been living here," the officer muttered, flipping through the contents of the bag. For a while, my skin crawled. Then they told me something worse. They hadn't found him. They searched the entire building, but there was no sign of whoever had been inside my walls. "It looks like he used the vents to move between apartments," the officer said grimly. "But we don't know where he went." I stared at the dark opening of the attic, the space where he had been watching me, listening, whispering, and now, he was somewhere else. I packed my things that night. I never went back. The landlord refused to tell me if they ever found him. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I can still hear it. Scratch, scratch, and a whisper, just outside my door. "I still think you're pretty."